"Stop right there, ma'am. Economy boards from the back. First class is for our premium guests only." The words hit Dr. Mildred Carter like cold water to the face. She hadn't even crossed the threshold of the jetway before the flight attendant's voice, loud, sharp, and perfectly clear, rang out for the whole boarding line to hear. All eyes swung in her direction. Mildred's grip tightened around the handle of her suitcase. For a split second, she wondered if this was really happening, or if the last 30 years of progress in her life had just vanished. It was barely 7:45 in the morning, and the Paris-bound cabin already buzzed with the energy of travelers. Well-dressed executives, international doctors, a pair of influencers snapping airport selfies. But as Tiffany Brooks, the chief purser, blocked the doorway, the entire world seemed to pause. There was the briefest silence, long enough for the French couple behind Mildred to exchange a look, long enough for the business traveler in the tailored suit to shift uneasily, long enough for Mildred herself to feel a flush crawl up her neck. She drew in a breath, calm and steady, the way she had so many times in her life, on operating tables, in board meetings, in moments when the world tried to remind her she didn't belong. Her voice was soft but clear. "My ticket is for 2A, first class." Tiffany's eyes scanned her up and down. Simple cardigan, worn leather bag, natural silver hair pulled into a bun. The attendant's lips thinned. "Let me see your boarding pass," she said, a practiced edge in her tone that made it clear this wasn't about procedure, it was about judgment. Mildred handed over her ticket without a word. She could feel the stares prickling her skin as Tiffany held the boarding pass up to the light, as if she'd catch it glowing "imposter." The attendant lingered, reading the name, looking again at Mildred, looking for a mistake, for proof she was right. From the corner of her eye, Mildred saw a young black attendant, Monica, tense up, uncertainty flickering across her face. The rest of the first-class boarding line, all pressed suits and pearl earrings, looked on with a kind of awkward fascination, not quite sure whether to intervene or simply pretend nothing was happening. Finally, with a tight professional smile, Tiffany handed the ticket back, just a shade too forcefully. "Enjoy your flight, Dr. Carter," she said, but the words dripped with condescension. Mildred pressed her lips together, nodded, and stepped forward. Her heart was pounding, but her expression betrayed nothing. She passed through the doorway, rolling her suitcase behind her, the sounds of the cabin returning in a low hum. The plush seats, the fresh coffee, the hush of privilege, all should have felt familiar. But today, everything felt different. She could feel eyes on her back as she stowed her bag and settled into 2A. Just then, as she was hanging her coat, a voice, Tiffany's again, cut through the background noise. "Some people will do anything to get into first class these days." The words weren't meant for her ears alone. It was a show, a warning, a message for everyone watching. People like you don't belong here. For a heartbeat, Mildred wanted to say something. She wanted to turn, to confront, to claim her space loudly. But she'd learned, power isn't always in the noise. Sometimes it's in the silence. The kind that makes people nervous because they know you could, at any moment, remind them exactly who you are. Across the aisle, the businessman pretended not to notice, but his eyes slid to Mildred, then away. Monica, the young attendant, hovered nearby with a worried look, but said nothing. A chill settled over the cabin, as if the luxury air itself had turned cold. Mildred sat tall, composed, but inside, her chest ached with the old familiar pain of being unseen, underestimated, unwelcome. How many times had she been here before? In a different city, a different boardroom, a different era? How many times had she let it go, for the sake of peace, for the sake of pride? She let her eyes close for a moment, feeling the sting, then the slow return of resolve. If only they knew, she thought. If only they understood how quickly this entire airline could shift with a single call. And this time, if the humiliation didn't stop, she'd make sure they remembered her, not for her silence, but for the gravity of what followed. Outside, the tarmac glinted in the rising sun. Inside, Dr. Mildred Carter's story was just beginning. And this flight, the flight where everyone assumed she didn't belong, was about to become one they'd never forget. As the steady flow of passengers continued, Mildred Carter settled into her seat. Second row, window, left side. She let her fingers trace the soft leather armrest, grounding herself. The luxury around her should have felt like a comfort, but the sting from the boarding incident lingered, sharp as the morning sunlight through the window. Tiffany Brooks, the chief purser, stalked up and down the aisle with the air of someone on a private stage. Her uniform was immaculate, her bun so tight it looked sculpted, and her high heels struck the cabin floor like a metronome. But behind the professional polish, Mildred could feel a coldness radiating from her, the same chill that had greeted her at the door. Across the aisle, a French doctor adjusted his glasses and glanced at Mildred with a look that was both sympathetic and apologetic, as if he recognized what had happened but didn't want to get involved. A middle-aged American couple whispered to each other, one tilting her head in Mildred's direction with just enough subtlety to avoid being obvious. Mildred adjusted her coat and smoothed her skirt, holding her chin high. She had been here before, unwanted, underestimated, sized up by people who thought a seat was more than just a number, that it was some kind of secret handshake, a code you had to look the part to know. She was too old to play dress-up just to put others at ease, too wise to let the pettiness stick for long. But even so, the hurt was real. Tiffany returned, carrying a tray of hot towels. She handed them out with practiced smiles, one for the French couple, another for the sharply dressed businessman, even a quick nod for Monica, the junior attendant, who was helping a young mother secure her baby's seat. But as Tiffany reached Mildred's row, her hand paused. She made a show of flipping the towel with her tongs, her eyes flickering over Mildred's face before she placed the tray on the cart and moved on without a word. It wasn't subtle. Monica caught the moment and frowned. She hovered nearby, hesitant, then stepped closer. "Would you like a hot towel, Dr. Carter?" she asked quietly, her voice so gentle it was almost a secret. Mildred managed a small, grateful smile and nodded. Monica slipped a towel into her hand with a conspiratorial wink, then turned away before Tiffany could notice. Just then, Tiffany returned, iPad in hand, a forced smile fixed to her lips. "I'm sorry, Dr. Carter, but we've had some confusion about the manifest. Can I see your boarding pass again?" Mildred met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "I've already shown it at the door, and again just now." Tiffany's smile stiffened. "It's just procedure, ma'am." She made no effort to lower her voice. "We sometimes have, well, ticket mix-ups, especially with upgrades. Could I see it, please?" Passengers across the cabin looked up, curiosity sharpening into judgment. The American woman whispered, "Why would she be in first class if she didn't have a ticket?" The businessman frowned but said nothing. Monica, back in the galley, bristled. With practiced calm, Mildred reached into her purse and handed over the boarding pass again. Tiffany inspected it, flipping it over as if searching for evidence of a forgery. She checked her iPad, tapped again, and finally, reluctantly, handed the ticket back, not meeting Mildred's eyes. "I suppose it's all in order," Tiffany said, her tone thin as ice. "But please, keep your boarding pass handy for the remainder of the flight." Mildred's hands trembled just slightly as she slipped the ticket away. She caught the French doctor's eye. He offered a faint smile, a silent apology for a discomfort that wasn't his to fix. Monica approached again, kneeling at Mildred's side, her voice low. "I'm sorry about that," she said. "If there's anything you need, anything at all, just let me know. Some people don't know how to treat guests." Mildred nodded, grateful for the kindness but unwilling to let the emotion show. "Thank you, Monica. I appreciate it." Meanwhile, Tiffany was whispering to a fellow attendant at the front of the cabin. Some people just can't accept their place, can they? I bet she's used to sneaking into places she doesn't belong. Mildred heard it, and so did Monica, who shot a sharp look at Tiffany before returning to her duties. The rest of the boarding passed in a blur of sideways glances and thinly veiled curiosity. Mildred stared out at the runway, her reflection fractured in the double-paned glass. She replayed Tiffany's words in her head, feeling the old anger and shame twist together. She wasn't young anymore, and time had toughened her skin, but sometimes the wounds reopened with the smallest of provocations. She thought back to her early days in medicine, to the rooms she'd entered where people had questioned whether she was the doctor or just another nurse or an aide. She remembered the first time she'd stood at a lectern, every seat filled with men who doubted she could possibly teach them anything. It had always been about belonging, about having to prove it over and over. Now, in her 70s, a new indignity. To be judged by an airline employee in front of strangers who would never know her life, her work, her worth. But Mildred had also learned something with age, that not every battle needed to be fought out loud. There was power in composure, in the refusal to stoop to the level of those who would drag her down. She let the hurt simmer, let the anger focus her mind. And as the aircraft doors closed and the safety video played, Dr. Mildred Carter looked out at the tarmac and made a silent vow. She would not let this moment define her. If this flight was going to become a lesson, then so be it. She'd spent a lifetime making history in quiet, determined ways. If it came to it, she'd do it again, without raising her voice. All she needed was one call. Have you ever found yourself in a place where you felt invisible, no matter what you've achieved? Let us know in the comments if you believe quiet strength can speak louder than words. And if you've ever experienced a moment like Mildred's, we'd love to hear your story. Your courage might inspire someone else watching right now. Mildred Carter pressed her fingertips to the rim of her coffee cup, feeling the heat bleed slowly into her palms. The plane hummed beneath her feet, steady, powerful, a marvel of modern engineering. Yet for all the luxury and technology, the air in first class felt thinner by the minute, as if the dismissive glances and silent judgments were slowly sucking all the oxygen from her part of the cabin. She stared out at the blue horizon, but her mind was far from the present. Even as the clouds rolled by, a different landscape played out behind her eyes. A long hallway in a Philadelphia hospital, late 1970s, the click of hard shoes echoing on cold linoleum. She could see herself, 3 decades younger, walking quickly to the trauma bay, stethoscope swinging at her neck, white coat pressed. Nurses parted for her, some with respect, others with barely concealed surprise. "Dr. Carter?" a new intern once whispered. "I was expecting, well, someone else." The message was always the same. "Are you sure you belong here?" She remembered the first time she'd led a full code in the ER. A young man shot in the chest, bleeding out on the table. Senior surgeons had hovered in the doorway, arms crossed, ready to swoop in if she failed. But she hadn't. She'd closed the wound, saved the man's life, then walked into the staff lounge to find her mentor, Dr. Lionel Weaver, beaming with pride. "That's how you do it, Mildred. Now do it again tomorrow, and the day after." But every victory came with another test. Some patients refused her care. Some residents questioned her orders. There were times she'd found her credentials doubted, once even challenged by a security guard as she rushed through the staff entrance in her scrubs. "You sure you're supposed to be back here, ma'am?" Even as she'd risen, chief resident, attending, finally board member, there was always a new room, a new set of eyes, a new mistake waiting to remind her, "You don't look the part." Back in seat 2A, Mildred blinked away the memory. For a moment, her hands trembled. She clasped them together in her lap, willing them to stillness. Across the aisle, Monica, the young flight attendant, watched. She moved through the cabin quietly, checking seatbelts, refilling water glasses. But her attention lingered on Mildred with an empathy she didn't bother to hide. Once, as she passed, she set a small packet of shortbread cookies on Mildred's tray table, whispering, "Just in case you want something sweet." Mildred smiled. A brief, private moment of gratitude, but the ache in her chest refused to subside. She wondered what Tiffany saw when she looked at her. Did she see an old woman trying to play at wealth? Did she see someone who didn't belong in the land of soft leather and Dom Perignon? Someone who'd stumbled in by accident or trickery? Did she see her age, her skin, her simplicity? And decide, in a split second, to gatekeep a space she herself only served? Mildred thought about her patients, especially the older ones who'd come to her after being brushed off by other doctors, too old, too complicated, too difficult to help. She'd always told her students, "Every person who sits in front of you is the sum of everything they've survived. Treat them like they matter, and watch what happens." As the plane crossed the Atlantic, Mildred glanced at the businessman across the aisle. He'd watched her on and off since boarding, sometimes with curiosity, sometimes with a faint, uneasy respect. She caught his eye and nodded. He nodded back, then quickly looked away, pretending to read the financial pages. She wondered if he'd ever been made to feel invisible, if he'd ever been told, with a word or a glance, that he didn't belong. The soft chime of the PA broke her reverie. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We're at cruising altitude and you are free to move about the cabin. We expect smooth flying all the way to Paris." Tiffany appeared again, moving down the aisle with a tray of amuse-bouche. She placed a plate in front of the French couple, smiled broadly, then turned to Mildred. Her smile vanished. "Would you like anything else, Dr. Carter?" she asked, her tone clipped. "I'm fine, thank you," Mildred replied, voice gentle but edged with steel. Tiffany lingered for a heartbeat, searching for weakness, then turned away. Monica slipped by moments later, offering a bottle of water and a soft, sincere smile. "We'll be starting lunch soon. I can bring you anything you like, Dr. Carter. No need to wait for the cart." Mildred's gratitude nearly brought tears to her eyes. She steadied herself, nodded. "Thank you, Monica. I appreciate your kindness." "It's nothing," Monica said. "My grandma always says, kindness is free, but it's worth everything." Mildred chuckled quietly, her heart warming. "Your grandma sounds wise." "She is. She's been through a lot. She'd tell you to keep your head high, no matter how anyone treats you." Mildred smiled, thinking of her own grandmother, who'd survived so much. Segregation, hardship, a world that often seemed stacked against her. She remembered the stories, standing in line for hours at the colored pharmacy, learning to read in secret after chores, telling young Mildred, "Never let anyone shrink you." She drew strength from those words now, feeling the ache of old wounds slowly transform into resolve. Lunch service began. Tiffany delivered plates to the rest of the cabin with careful attention. Wine refilled, napkins folded just so. Small talk for the right guests. When she reached Mildred's row, she handed her a tray without a word, barely meeting her gaze. Mildred accepted it, unfolding her napkin with deliberate grace. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, not because she was hungry, but because she refused to let anyone rush her from her place. Every forkful was a silent protest, a reminder that she had earned her seat. After the meal, Monica collected trays and offered Mildred another coffee. As she poured, she whispered, "You're doing great. Don't let her make you feel small." Mildred squeezed Monica's hand gently, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you. That means more than you know." As the lights dimmed for the overnight stretch, Mildred settled back, closing her eyes. She let the low thrum of the engines wash over her, the memories of struggle and triumph mingling with the present. She reminded herself, she was the sum of all she had survived, every insult, every triumph, every act of quiet resistance. She would not be moved. And somewhere, between the past and the promise of Paris, Dr. Mildred Carter felt her resolve crystallize. This flight would not break her. If anything, it would be the moment that proved her power again. The hush in first class was heavier than ever as the cabin lights brightened for midday service. By now, the passengers had settled into their routines, some tapping away on laptops, others dozing beneath soft blankets. Mildred Carter, however, was wide awake. She could feel the tension thickening in the air, coiling tighter every time Tiffany Brooks swept by. The meal service had barely ended when Tiffany returned, iPad in hand, eyes scanning the manifest with calculated purpose. She stopped abruptly at Mildred's seat, blocking the aisle as if preparing for a confrontation. "Excuse me, Dr. Carter," Tiffany said, her voice pitched just loud enough for the surrounding rows to hear. "I need to verify your boarding pass again. There's a discrepancy in the manifest." The words landed like a slap. Sharp, public, unmistakable. Mildred froze, feeling the familiar heat of humiliation crawl up her neck. A murmur rippled through the rows as passengers looked up from their screens. Curiosity piqued. Across the aisle, the French doctor shifted uncomfortably. The American woman in 3D stared openly, eyes narrowed with suspicion. Mildred tried to steady her breath, holding herself tall. "I've already shown my pass twice," she replied, voice low but clear. Tiffany smiled, a cold, brittle thing. "I understand, ma'am, but this is procedure. I need to be thorough." Monica, who had just emerged from the galley with a tray of fruit, froze at the scene. Her eyes darted between Mildred and Tiffany, uncertainty etched in every line of her face. Reluctantly, Mildred reached into her purse and produced the boarding pass. She held it out, her hand trembling ever so slightly. Tiffany snatched it, examining it as if it might dissolve into dust. She tapped her iPad, flipped the pass over, then looked pointedly at Mildred. "Could you please confirm how you purchased this ticket?" she asked, voice loud enough for several rows to hear. Gasps and whispers broke out. The businessman in 2C leaned forward, his interest now bordering on concern. A young influencer in 1B raised her phone, pretending to check messages but secretly recording the exchange. Mildred's face burned, but she held Tiffany's gaze, refusing to shrink. "Through my business account, same as always." Tiffany's mouth twitched, as if she wanted to say more but thought better of it. She handed the ticket back, but not before letting it slip from her fingers, forcing Mildred to fumble awkwardly as it fluttered to the floor. A hush fell over the cabin. Monica rushed forward, scooping up the boarding pass and pressing it gently into Mildred's hand. "Here you go, Dr. Carter," she said softly, her kindness a balm in the tense silence. Tiffany stepped back, clearing her throat. "Thank you. We appreciate your cooperation." The words rang hollow. As Tiffany marched away, a ripple of discomfort spread through the cabin. Some passengers looked away, embarrassed to have witnessed the scene. Others stared, unable to hide their curiosity or their silent judgment. Mildred sat rigid, every muscle tight. The humiliation was raw and fresh, but beneath it, a new resolve began to bloom. She would not cry. She would not let them see her break. Not here, not now. Across the aisle, the French doctor finally spoke. His English was formal but clear. "This is not right. She has done nothing wrong." The American woman nodded, suddenly emboldened. "Why single her out like that? That was just mean." Mildred felt a flicker of gratitude, but she didn't turn to acknowledge the support. She kept her eyes fixed ahead, steadying herself with each breath. Monica lingered at her side for a moment longer, her expression apologetic. "I'm so sorry, Dr. Carter. She has no right." Mildred managed a faint smile. "You're doing just fine, Monica. Thank you." The next hour dragged. Tiffany continued her rounds, but her professional mask had begun to crack. She snapped at Monica for a minor error. She rushed through service for the rest of the cabin, her movements sharp, impatient. Passengers felt the tension and responded with nervous silence. Mildred, meanwhile, sat lost in thought. She remembered all the times she'd been tested, all the moments when someone in authority tried to put her in her place. She thought about the young medical student she'd mentored last spring, a black woman, quiet but brilliant. who'd confided her fears of never looking like a surgeon. Mildred had told her, "Don't let anyone write your story for you. You belong, even when the world says otherwise." Now she repeated those words to herself like a mantra. She belonged. She had earned her seat 100 times over. Suddenly, the PA crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our initial descent. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." As Monica helped Mildred stow her tray, she whispered, "You're stronger than you think, and you're not alone." Mildred squeezed her hand. "Thank you, Monica. I wish more people saw things your way." As the plane began its descent, Mildred's reflection shimmered in the window. A portrait of dignity battered but unbroken. She could feel the anger pulsing beneath her calm exterior, a quiet storm waiting for its moment. She thought of her mentors, her grandmother, her patients, everyone who taught her that real strength wasn't in the shouting, but in the unwavering refusal to bend. She would carry that lesson into whatever came next. Just as the wheels touched down, Tiffany made one last pass through the aisle, her face pinched and pale. She avoided Mildred's eyes, focusing instead on her clipboard. But the rest of the cabin saw everything. Every awkward glance, every misplaced smile, every ounce of power abused, and every act of silent resistance. As the plane rolled to a stop at the gate, Monica met Mildred's gaze and gave her a tiny, defiant nod. Mildred smiled back, her composure flawless, her spirit intact. She had survived worse. She would survive this too. But this time, she was done suffering in silence. Some battles, Mildred knew, could be won without a word. Others demanded a reckoning. And as the cabin prepared to disembark, Mildred Carter knew exactly what her next move would be. As the plane taxied toward the terminal, the buzz of the engines could barely muffle the tension simmering through first class. Dr. Mildred Carter sat unmoving in 2A, her heart pounding with a cocktail of anger and determination. Outside, ground crews swarmed the tarmac in neon vests. Inside, the world felt as if it had shrunk to the size of this single, silent cabin. Everyone waiting, watching, pretending not to have seen what just unfolded. Monica hovered nearby, collecting stray glasses, her concern unhidden. Tiffany, however, remained in the galley, clutching her iPad and fussing with the manifest, her mask of professionalism now brittle as glass. Mildred's mind raced, not with self-doubt or embarrassment, but with a steely focus she'd only ever summoned in the most critical moments of her surgical career. She'd been humiliated before, but this time was different. The way Tiffany had handled her, questioned, exposed, isolated her in front of strangers, had crossed a line that demanded a response, not just for herself, but for everyone who'd ever sat where she now sat, feeling small and unwelcome. She let her fingers close around her phone, tucked discreetly in her lap beneath the tray table. There was no fanfare, no anger in her expression, just a quiet, steady resolve. She scrolled through her contacts until she reached a name: Charles Underwood, the CEO of Sky Medical Lease, a global hospital investment group and Atlantic Sky's most important partner. She glanced around. Monica was a few rows back, guiding an elderly couple toward the exit. Tiffany was out of sight, possibly giving orders to the rest of her team. The businessman across the aisle was busy packing his laptop, but occasionally stole glances at her, the echo of the earlier scene still heavy in his eyes. Mildred raised the phone to her ear, keeping her voice low, her movements unremarkable. When the line picked up, she heard a familiar voice, steady, confident, but a little surprised to hear from her. "Mildred, I didn't expect to hear from you until the conference dinner in Paris. Everything all right?" She paused, taking a slow breath. "Charles, I won't keep you. I need you to hear something important, something I would rather have said in private, but circumstances demand otherwise." He sensed the gravity in her tone. "Of course. What's happened?" She kept her voice measured, never letting it crack. "I was on Atlantic Sky, Flight 312 from JFK. In first class. The way I was treated by the lead flight attendant, publicly humiliated, questioned, made to feel like I didn't belong, was beyond disappointing. I'm not the only one who's ever experienced it, Charles, but I may be the only one who can make this point heard. If this is how their premium passengers are treated, I have to ask you and all our partners to review our ongoing relationships with Atlantic Sky. Respect, to me, is non-negotiable. There was a pause, brief but thunderous. Charles's voice dropped, firm and clear. Understood. That's all I need to know. I'll take it from here, Mildred. You did the right thing. Rest. I'll make sure this is addressed at the highest level. She thanked him, her voice soft but certain, and ended the call. The entire exchange had taken less than 2 minutes. No shouting, no demands, no threats. Just one silent call. Mildred slid her phone away and sat back, her pulse finally slowing. She felt the familiar ache in her chest, this time not of defeat, but of relief, even a hint of triumph. There was nothing left to say. She had done what she needed to do. As the doors opened and the wave of first-class passengers began to gather their things, Mildred moved slowly, letting the others go first. Monica returned, pausing by her seat. "Are you all right, Dr. Carter?" she asked, voice low. Mildred offered a small, genuine smile. "I am now. Thank you, Monica, for everything." Monica's eyes glistened, but she nodded. "I hope you'll come back and fly with us again." Mildred didn't answer, not directly. Instead, she squeezed Monica's hand and whispered, "Kindness will always matter. Don't let anyone take that from you." A few steps ahead, Tiffany stood stiffly near the door, her posture rigid, her face expressionless. She could not meet Mildred's gaze as she passed. On the jet bridge, Mildred was swept up in the flow of disembarking travelers, some already on their phones, others chatting about Paris plans. Behind her, she caught the French doctor's eye. He offered a respectful nod. "I hope your trip improves, madame," he said quietly. She thanked him, then continued into the terminal, the echo of suitcase wheels rattling on tile beneath her feet. Outside the arrivals hall, Mildred paused to breathe the airport air, tinged with jet fuel, excitement, and possibility. She checked her phone. No news yet, but she knew what she'd set in motion would move swiftly and silently, like a ripple across a pond. In a conference room miles away, Charles Underwood dialed a number he rarely used, one that led straight to the board of directors for Atlantic Sky. "Gentlemen, we have a situation," he began. "A very serious situation, one that, unless corrected, will jeopardize a $2.7 billion partnership. I suggest you listen carefully." Within minutes, emails zipped across continents. Calls were made. The word audit appeared in subject lines. Risk managers and PR teams braced themselves. A domino had fallen, and everyone could feel it. Back at the terminal, Monica found Mildred waiting for her car. She hesitated, then stepped forward. "Dr. Carter, I just wanted to say, I'm proud I got to serve you, even if just in small ways." Mildred smiled, her eyes softening. "You did more than you know, Monica. Remember, sometimes the quietest acts of kindness have the loudest impact." As her car arrived and the doors closed, Mildred let herself finally relax. She had not raised her voice. She had not made a scene. She had simply done what she had always done. Let her actions speak. Let her dignity lead. The world could doubt her, but it could not deny her. From her seat in the quiet car, watching Paris approach, Dr. Mildred Carter knew this was far from over. The next call would not be hers. It would be the world answering for its silence. While Dr. Mildred Carter's quiet presence disappeared into the crowd at Charles de Gaulle, the real turbulence was only just beginning, miles away, behind closed doors, where power shifted in silence. Inside a sleek conference room at Atlantic Sky's Manhattan headquarters, the tension was palpable. Executives, legal counsel, and PR strategists sat around a glossy table, faces drawn and pale. News had traveled fast. A problematic incident on Flight 312, flagged by none other than Charles Underwood. The email, marked urgent, was already making the rounds on private devices. At the head of the table, CEO Roger McKenna looked more tired than usual. He tapped a pen restlessly against a file marked Priority. "Read it again," he said. The VP of Corporate Partnerships obliged, voice clipped with anxiety. Quote, "A high-value partner was publicly humiliated by your lead flight attendant. If this is not addressed at the highest level, Sky Medical Lease will be forced to review the $2.7 billion contract set for renewal next quarter." A chill moved through the room. Rogers swore softly. "Do we know who the passenger was?" "Dr. Mildred Carter. She's on the advisory board at Sky Medical, a retired surgeon, heavily respected. She's also a major figure in several philanthropic circles," came the answer. "And sir, she's got friends in media, law, medicine, you name it." Someone else added, "Passengers in first class witnessed the entire thing. There's already chatter online." A senior legal counsel frowned. "Have we heard from the crew?" "Not yet," said the head of cabin services, "but I've called for a statement from Tiffany Brooks. We're also interviewing Monica Ellis, the junior attendant, and gathering feedback from passengers who filed complaints." "Complaints? Plural?" Roger's brow furrowed deeper. "Yes, sir. 2 so far, both mentioning public humiliation and selective enforcement of rules. One included a cell phone video. Nothing viral yet, but it's spreading in private channels." The room fell silent. The kind of silence where the only thing louder is the pounding of blood in your ears. Across the Atlantic, in a corner of the Paris arrivals hall, Monica Ellis lingered in uniform, staring at her phone. She'd heard from a friend back in New York that something big was happening. An internal message from HR flashed on her screen. "Report immediately for a post-flight debrief. Do not discuss incident with press or passengers." Her stomach twisted. She kept replaying the scene. Tiffany's sharp words, the stares, Mildred's dignified silence. Monica had tried to do the right thing, but the guilt pressed on her. Had she done enough? Should she have spoken up louder? Should she have stood in front of Mildred, instead of behind her, in that crucial moment? Passengers exited in waves, but Monica waited, hoping to see Mildred once more, to thank her for her strength, or at least say goodbye. But by the time Monica reached the curb, Mildred was gone, swept away in the rhythm of the city. Meanwhile, in a bustling break room at JFK, a handful of Atlantic Sky crew huddled over their phones. News traveled fast among flight crews. A cryptic text here, a whispered rumor there. Someone shared the phrase, "They're talking crew suspension, even blacklist," over a first-class incident. Others chimed in, recalling Tiffany's reputation for running a tight ship, sometimes too tight. One veteran attendant shook his head. "It's about time someone spoke up. That woman in 2A handled herself better than half the execs I've ever seen." The rest nodded, uneasily aware that any one of them could be next in the crosshairs if the wrong person was watching. Back in New York, Roger McKenna's phone buzzed. A new email subject line flashed. "Urgent. Request for crew suspension. Flight 312. It came from Sky Medical Lease, with the authority of Charles Underwood behind every word. He stood, gesturing for the room's attention. "This just escalated. Legal. Begin an internal investigation immediately. HR, prepare statements from both flight attendants. PR, draft an apology. I want this handled by the book. Nobody speaks to the media. And get me a call with Dr. Carter. Today." His voice left no room for argument. The team leaped into action, emails flying, phone lines lighting up, assistants dashing in and out with updates. A junior manager leaned over to the head of cabin services, whispering, "You think Tiffany realizes how much trouble she's in?" The reply was flat. "She will." Across Paris, Mildred Carter watched the city slide past from the back seat of her taxi, the Eiffel Tower sparkling in the distance. Her phone remained silent. No missed calls, no news alerts. Just the steady beat of her own heart, a little lighter now than it had been an hour before. She thought about the chain reaction she'd set off. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't threatened. She had simply told the truth to the right person, and the world had begun to shift. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who'd ever been told they didn't belong, who'd ever been made to feel small by someone in uniform, or behind a desk, or with a clipboard in hand. This was for them too. The taxi stopped at her hotel. As she stepped out, she took a moment to steady herself, glancing at the Paris sky. It was overcast, but somehow the city still seemed bright. She exhaled and smiled, not in triumph, but in quiet satisfaction. Sometimes, the biggest change starts with the smallest act of courage. And for those of you watching, have you ever seen a single moment of quiet courage set off a chain reaction in your life or someone else's? If you believe one silent call can shake the world, or if you've ever witnessed real justice happen quietly, share your story in the comments. You never know whose life you might touch by speaking up. The news didn't break all at once. It started as a whisper, a private message on a flight crew group chat, a blurry cell phone video passed from friend to friend, a quiet inquiry from a business partner in Europe to an old acquaintance in Manhattan. By mid-morning, the rumor had a life of its own. Something had happened on Atlantic Sky Flight 312, and it wasn't just about a late arrival or a missing meal. In the financial district, a junior analyst at an investment firm spotted the first ripple. Atlantic Sky's share price dipped 0.5% by noon, with no major market news. Traders shrugged it off, but the smarter ones dug deeper, searching social media for clues. A post on an obscure aviation forum caught attention. High-profile passenger humiliated in first class. Heard it's connected to a big hospital group. The post quickly gained traction, speculation growing in the shadows of Wall Street. By lunchtime, the whispers reached the offices of Sky Medical Lease. Charles Underwood fielded 2 calls from rival airlines, both eager to revisit partnership opportunities. He declined politely, his voice calm, but made a mental note. Everyone in the industry was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Inside Atlantic Sky headquarters, the crisis had gone from urgent to all-consuming. An emergency meeting was called in the main conference room, a hush settling over the table as the head of HR projected a timeline of the incident. 8:03 a.m., Mildred Carter boarded. 8:18, first manifest check. 8:55, second public boarding pass demand. 10:21, complaint filed by a witness. 10:42, Sky Medical Contacts CEO. "We need to control this narrative," Roger McKenna insisted, his voice clipped. "What's our official statement?" A weary PR manager responded. "We're drafting an apology to Dr. Carter and all affected passengers. We'll cite a commitment to dignity and respect for every guest." The head of legal raised a hand. "That's fine for now, but if the video leaks, or if Dr. Carter speaks out, this won't be enough. We need to review Tiffany Brooks's employment record, and fast." Roger nodded. "She's already been pulled from duty. Monica Ellis is being debriefed as we speak." A younger executive, pale and anxious, asked, "What about the press?" The PR manager shook her head. "No mainstream outlets have it. Yet. But I've received 2 emails from bloggers and 1 from an advocacy group. It's just a matter of time." Meanwhile, Tiffany Brooks sat alone in a small office on the ground floor, her hands twisting a tissue to shreds. She'd been told not to check her phone, but she could feel the panic rising every time a supervisor walked by. The airline's union rep sat with her, mostly silent, jotting notes. "What happens now?" Tiffany whispered, eyes red-rimmed. The rep shrugged. "Internal review, suspension. They'll want your version of events. I suggest you're honest, but careful." Tiffany stared at her hand, shame burning in her cheeks. She replayed every moment on that flight, her words echoing louder each time. "Are you sure you belong here?" It had felt like a small assertion of order at the time, a routine check, but now it seemed monstrous, pointless, cruel. and so very public. Monica Ellis, meanwhile, was led into a HR meeting room by two managers she'd only met once. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying every detail. The questions came quickly. Did you witness Ms. Brooks' interactions with Dr. Carter? Yes. Did Dr. Carter ever behave in a way that justified being singled out for additional checks? No. She was calm, respectful. Did you see or hear anything you would describe as discriminatory? Monica hesitated, thinking of Mildred's steady gaze, the way she'd held herself with such dignity despite the humiliation. I did, Monica said finally. I think Dr. Carter was treated unfairly. If it were me in that seat, I'd want someone to speak up. The manager nodded, typing furiously. Thank you, Monica. That's all for now. On the other side of the Atlantic, Mildred Carter moved through her hotel lobby unnoticed, her phone buzzing quietly in her bag. She resisted the urge to check her messages. Part of her knew what would be waiting. Voicemails from old colleagues. A note from Charles Underwood. Thank you, I'll keep you posted. And possibly a request for an interview from the local news. She kept her silence. She didn't need headlines. She wanted change. Her only call had been enough to set the wheels in motion. By late afternoon in New York, the rumor had grown into a wave. The first major tweet broke through at 2:17 p.m. Board member of Sky Medical Lease mistreated by Atlantic Sky crew. Shareholders take note. Within minutes, the airline's customer service phone lines lit up with questions, some angry, some concerned, a few even supportive. Is it true your crew humiliated a doctor in first class? I want to cancel my flight if you don't treat all passengers equally. One call handler put her customer on hold and whispered to her colleague, It's going viral. Did you see the video? No, but my brother just texted about it. Says there's a movement to boycott. That same hour, Atlantic Sky's stock took a sharper dip, now down 3%, with nervous investors bracing for a press firestorm. As night fell, the news broke onto the homepage of a major business outlet. Respected surgeon, partner at Sky Medical, target of airline mistreatment, investors demand answers. A side column showed a familiar face. Dr. Mildred Carter, years younger, receiving a humanitarian award. Back in her room, Mildred stood at the window, the Eiffel Tower glowing in the distance. She still said nothing. There would be a time to speak, she thought. But for now, silence was power. Her one call had become a chorus, and she could feel the world turning. Inside Atlantic Sky's executive suite, Roger McKenna stared at the headlines and the numbers. His hands shook as he dialed Charles Underwood. We're taking this seriously, Charles. I promise you, heads will roll. Dignity and respect, starting now. But even as he spoke, he knew this storm would take more than a press release to weather. The next morning, the ripple became a wave. By sunrise on Wall Street, Atlantic Sky's name trended not just in travel blogs, but across the financial networks and headline tickers. A segment on Bloomberg. Major hospital group threatens $2.7 billion contract. Airline stock plunges. By noon, the company's share price was down 8%, with analysts openly speculating on a coming leadership shakeup. Inside the Manhattan headquarters, the mood had gone from anxious to frantic. Roger McKenna stood before a war room table ringed with exhausted executives and crisis consultants. It was only 8:45 a.m., but the faces around him already looked shell-shocked. Hair tousled, ties loose, coffee untouched. Let's be clear, Roger said, his voice grave. This is no longer just about passenger service. It's a question of governance, of culture, of whether we can be trusted at all. We've received 3 major calls from institutional investors demanding a full explanation. Our board is meeting in 40 minutes, and if Sky Medical pulls their partnership, we lose more than a contract. We lose credibility. A junior lawyer piped up, eyes wide. Sir, the union is already involved. They're defending Tiffany Brooks, but Monica Ellis's testimony has gone public. She said, and I quote, "If it had been me in 2A, I don't think I'd have been treated the same way." Another executive slid a tablet across the table. Video footage, blurry but unmistakable, of Tiffany confronting Mildred in first class. It had been clipped and reposted, now with over 40,000 views and climbing. Roger watched, his face hardening as Tiffany's voice rang out. Clear, condescending, and far too loud for comfort. "Can you confirm how you purchased this ticket? Are you sure you belong in first class?" The hush, the awkward glances, Monica's quiet defense, Mildred's poise. It was all there. The comments below were merciless. This woman's face, pure dignity. The airline should be ashamed. How many times does this happen to people who don't have the power to call a CEO? Shout out to Monica for speaking up. We need more like her. "Stop it," Roger snapped, and the executive muted the tablet. A PR consultant cleared her throat. "We have a draft apology, but it's not enough. Investors want to see accountability. Customers want change. And Dr. Carter, well, she said nothing. But her silence is killing us. The story is everywhere, and the narrative is out of our hands." Someone else added, "We're getting emails from advocacy groups, doctors' associations, and even several city officials. Some are threatening boycotts. Others want a statement from Dr. Carter herself. Do we reach out?" Roger shook his head. "She's too smart to speak now. Every hour she waits, the pressure mounts on us. She knows exactly what she's doing." Across Paris, Mildred Carter spent her morning in a quiet cafe, a strong espresso in hand. She read the digital front pages, the photo of her younger self, the headlines about dignity in the face of injustice. But she refused all requests for interviews. She answered only 2 messages, one to Charles Underwood, "Thank you for keeping your word," and one to Monica, "You did the right thing. Proud of you. Stay true." The city outside was alive with spring. Couples argued over croissants, students rushed for the metro, taxis honked, and somewhere in the noise, Mildred found a strange peace. She'd spent a lifetime being forced to prove she belonged. Now, for the first time, she could let the world see for itself. Back in New York, Monica was summoned for a second interview, this time by a pair of board members, not just HR. They listened carefully as she described Tiffany's tone, the shock in the cabin, and the quiet courage Mildred had shown. "Do you believe Dr. Carter was singled out because of her appearance?" one board member asked. Monica didn't hesitate. "Yes, and I think if she hadn't been who she was, if she'd been anyone else, it would have ended with her in tears, not with a corporate investigation." The board member nodded, face grave. "Thank you, Monica. That's all for now. We may need you again." The day's drama peaked with a closed-door emergency board meeting at Atlantic Sky. 10 directors dialed in from across the world. The general counsel opened with the facts. Shareholder revolt brewing, video circulating, partners threatening to pull out, public sentiment against them. A heated debate followed. Some wanted to fire Tiffany Brooks on the spot, others to wait for the full investigation. One older board member said, "We are being made an example of. If we don't act, we lose the next generation of customers, especially those who've ever been made to feel less than." A younger director, voice trembling, said, "My own mother just texted me. She said, 'If this is how you treat people, why would anyone fly with you?'" Silence. Then Roger spoke, softer this time. "It's not about the press. It's about trust. We fix this, or we're finished." The meeting ended with a vote. Suspend Tiffany Brooks indefinitely. Begin an external review of all first-class crew conduct, and invite Dr. Carter to meet with the board, on her terms. The world watched as Atlantic Sky issued a rare public statement before the markets closed. "We deeply regret the experience of Dr. Mildred Carter and reaffirm our commitment to dignity, respect, and equality for every passenger. We are taking immediate steps to review and reform our policies. We thank those who have spoken up and promised to listen, learn, and act." By midnight, the video had surpassed 150,000 views. The story had become a case study in power, how it can be wielded quietly, and how silence, in the right hands, can reshape the world. Mildred Carter watched the headlines from her hotel room, the Paris skyline shimmering beyond the window. She smiled, not in triumph, but in quiet vindication. This battle was not just hers. It belonged to everyone who'd ever sat quietly, refusing to be erased. And somewhere, an entire industry began to reckon with the truth. Sometimes, justice travels at 30,000 feet, on the wings of one silent call. The city of Paris sparkled beneath a cold spring sun as Dr. Mildred Carter stared out her hotel window, watching the Seine shimmer below. She'd barely slept. Her phone buzzed through the night with messages from colleagues, friends, even strangers, most offering support. A few sharing their own stories of humiliation at the hands of someone in uniform. A subtle sense of responsibility pressed on her chest. She'd made a single call, and the world had started moving. At 8:07 a.m., her inbox pinged with a formal invitation from the board of Atlantic Sky. Dr. Carter, on behalf of our board and executive leadership, we invite you to join a special session to share your experience and perspectives. Your voice is critical to our path forward. The meeting will be private, at your convenience. We are ready to listen. Sincerely, Roger McKenna, CEO. She took a moment to consider. She had no interest in vengeance or public spectacle, only in dignity, and the hope that the next Mildred Carter would never have to endure what she had. By noon, arrangements were made. The meeting would be virtual, with the company's entire board dialing in from their offices around the world. Charles Underwood called as well, promising her his full backing. "Don't hold back, Mildred. You have more power in this room than you think." She thanked him, steeled herself, and at 3:00 p.m. Paris time, clicked the secure link. On her laptop, the faces of Atlantic Sky's board filled the screen. Executives in glass-walled offices, some with artfully blurred backgrounds, others with stacks of legal pads and printouts within arm's reach. Roger McKenna, his tie looser than usual, opened the meeting. "Dr. Carter, thank you for joining us. I'll be blunt. The events of Flight 312 have shaken our company to its core. I want to assure you, this is not a formality. We are here to listen, to learn, and to act." Mildred's camera showed only her face. Calm, composed, lines of wisdom carved into her features. She took a breath, letting the silence linger a moment. "I appreciate the invitation," she began, "but you should know, I didn't seek this spotlight. I am here because I believe in accountability, real accountability, not just apologies. I am here for every person who has ever been made to feel small for looking different, sounding different, or daring to sit where others thought they shouldn't." Roger nodded, his voice husky. "Please, Dr. Carter, walk us through what happened, in your own words." So she did. She told them about the eyes that trailed her as she boarded, the way Tiffany Brooks' smile turned cold, the repeated requests for her ticket in front of strangers, the public humiliation. She described Monica's quiet support, the hush that fell over first class, and the feeling, so much sharper than anger, of being judged not for her accomplishments, but for her presence. One director, a woman in her 50s, leaned forward. "You said this isn't the first time?" Mildred gave a small, rueful smile. "No, ma'am. Not by a long shot. I've walked into boardrooms and been mistaken for an assistant, entered hospitals and been challenged by security. But I never thought, after all these years, I'd be made to prove I belonged, again, 30,000 feet above the world." She paused, letting her words settle. "I don't want to see another woman, another black woman, another older traveler, another anyone, go through this. Not in 2025, not ever again." The board sat in silence, several faces downcast. A young executive, clearly shaken, said, "We've read so many statements of apology before. What do you want us to do? Really do, so that this isn't just another press cycle?" Mildred met his gaze squarely. "You start by facing what's broken. Your training is about procedures, not people. Your culture lets small abuses slip by until someone with a loud enough name gets hurt. You need third-party oversight. Real, not cosmetic. You need to invite people like Monica, who risked her comfort to do what's right, to help train your staff. And you need to show your own passengers that silence in the face of abuse will never be company policy again. A senior board member, a black man with a measured voice, added quietly, "My own daughter told me she's afraid to travel for work. She watched that video. She said, 'If that's what power gets you, what chance do the rest of us have?'" The room fell silent. Even Roger's voice faltered. "Dr. Carter, will you help us design a solution? Not just for the press, but for real change?" She nodded, but only after a long pause. "I will, but only if you commit publicly and privately to building a system where dignity is the norm, not the exception. I want Monica's name known. I want the staff to see that kindness is rewarded, not punished. And I want you to remember that sometimes the loudest voices are the ones that never shout." As the meeting ended, the PR director drafted a statement for immediate release. But Roger stopped her. "No more empty words. We wait for the changes. Then we speak." Within hours, news broke that Atlantic Sky was forming an independent review panel, co-chaired by Dr. Carter herself. Monica Ellis was offered a leading role in new staff training. Tiffany Brooks's suspension became permanent, pending review, and the union agreed not to challenge the decision after reviewing the evidence and passenger statements. The headlines exploded. Dr. Mildred Carter to lead Airline Diversity Initiative after viral incident. Investors saw hope. Stock prices, after days of bleeding, ticked up as analysts predicted the company might weather the storm. Comment sections filled with stories from everyday travelers, people who'd never flown first class, but knew the feeling of being singled out. In Paris, Mildred walked by the river at dusk, feeling lighter than she had in days. Her phone buzzed with a message from Monica. "Thank you. I never thought anyone would listen to someone like me. I'm proud to help." Mildred smiled, replying, "This is how it starts. One person, one act. I'm proud of you." That evening, Charles Underwood called with the news. "You've done it, Mildred. They're listening. The board's even asking about rolling out your training at their partner airlines." She thanked him quietly, then turned her phone off and let herself enjoy the Paris night. The laughter, the music, the small joys she'd fought so hard to reclaim. Inside Atlantic Sky headquarters, Roger McKenna gathered his team. "This isn't just crisis management. This is our future. We owe it to Dr. Carter, and to every person who ever sat where she sat, to do better. That starts now." The sense of urgency had shifted. This was no longer about one passenger, one flight, or even one company. It was about setting a new standard in an old industry, one that had learned finally that dignity is more powerful than any boarding pass. And as the news spread, people around the world watched, remembered, and felt, perhaps for the first time in a long time, that justice really could travel at 30,000 feet. It had been a week since the headlines swept across the world, but the aftershocks of Dr. Mildred Carter's flight rippled on, reaching far beyond Paris, New York, or any single airport lounge. In Chicago, a retired postal worker sat at her kitchen table, her tablet open to a news site. She scrolled through an op-ed about the silent revolution at 30,000 feet, her heart thumping as she read the comments. There were stories just like hers, men and women, black and white, young and old, recalling moments they'd been shamed, doubted, or dismissed in places meant to serve them all. The names were different, the feelings the same. Across the country, a young medical student sat in a campus library, eyes shining as she watched the now famous video. She replayed the moment Mildred stood her ground, never once raising her voice, never once apologizing for her place. For the first time in months, she dared to imagine herself not just surviving, but thriving in rooms where she wasn't expected. She sent the video to her mother with a single word: hope. In a sunlit break room at Atlantic Sky, Monica Ellis listened to a message from the airline's CEO. played on the staff PA system. "We are grateful for those among us who stand for kindness, even under pressure. Monica, your integrity is a model for all of us." Her colleagues applauded as she blushed, a little overwhelmed, but quietly proud. Her phone lit up with texts. "You did the right thing. You made us all proud. Never doubt it." Even Tiffany Brooks, at home on unpaid leave, watched the world shift around her. At first, she'd been defensive, angry at the attention, convinced she'd only been doing her job. But as the days passed and the stories multiplied, she found herself replaying every word, every choice, and saw them in a harsher light. She read the apology email she'd sent to Mildred a dozen times, each time hoping she might learn something new about herself. Change, she realized, often begins with discomfort. Meanwhile, within Atlantic Sky's boardroom, the Carter Protocol was quickly becoming industry gospel. Third-party audits, training reforms, and new codes of conduct were rolling out across not just their own flights, but those of partner airlines. Industry magazines hailed the move. Dignity takes flight. Customers responded with a surge of goodwill, messages, tweets, and even handwritten letters pouring in. A frequent flyer wrote, "I booked with you again, not because I forgot, but because I see you're learning. Thank you for listening." For Dr. Mildred Carter, the days were quieter, but fuller. She took early morning walks along the Seine, her phone buzzing with requests for interviews, panels, speeches. She turned most down, choosing instead to focus on the advisory work she'd promised. She collaborated with Monica, crafting training scenarios, role-playing difficult moments, shaping a curriculum that began not with procedures, but with empathy. One evening, Monica called her, voice trembling with emotion. "Dr. Carter, they want me to speak at the staff summit. I'm nervous. What if I say the wrong thing?" Mildred laughed gently. "Speak from your heart, Monica. Tell them what kindness feels like, especially when it's not easy. If you do that, you can't go wrong." Word of Mildred's leadership and Monica's story spread far beyond the airline industry. Local papers in Vermont ran features about their Dr. Carter. Universities reached out, asking her to share what she'd learned. People she'd never met wrote emails, short, heartfelt, sometimes just a single line. "Thank you for standing up so the rest of us might sit in peace." What moved Mildred most were the private stories, notes from nurses, bus drivers, teachers, and parents. They didn't want fame, just respect. She realized, as she replied to each, that this was the legacy she wanted. Not a headline or a trending hashtag, but a ripple of quiet dignity, echoing in places she might never see. And at the heart of it all, she remained steadfast, reminding herself and those around her that sometimes the world changes not with a shout, but with a single silent call. Spring in Vermont was always slow to arrive, but this year, the air felt different. Dr. Mildred Carter returned home to her tidy house by the river, the fields outside still brown from winter, but the sky promising blue. She unpacked her small suitcase, put her phone on silent, and exhaled as if for the first time in weeks. The world she'd left behind in Paris seemed impossibly far, yet its echoes followed her everywhere she went. Word of her return had trickled through the small town before she even landed. A neighbor left a basket of fresh eggs on her porch with a handwritten note. "You made us proud." The clerk at the market met her gaze with a soft, "Welcome home, Dr. Carter." Mildred smiled, grateful for the simplicity of kindness after days in the storm of headlines. Her inbox was still a blur, invitations from universities, advocacy groups, and airlines. She declined most, answering only a few, always with humility, always with a note that real change takes more than one person or even one headline. She recommended Monica Ellis for every opportunity, insisting, "If you want to understand courage, listen to her story too." Meanwhile, across the country, Monica stood in front of a room full of flight attendants at Atlantic Sky headquarters, her hands trembling slightly but her voice strong. She described not only the day on Flight 312, but also what it felt like to be a bystander, and finally, to act. Kindness is a risk, she told them, but it's the only one that changes anything. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, then a wave of applause, some even standing. Monica realized, as tears stung her eyes, that she was no longer invisible. That same morning, Atlantic Sky's CEO, Roger McKenna, stepped onto a small stage in the company's New York headquarters. Cameras from major news outlets lined the back of the room. Shareholders watched via live stream. Behind him, banners read, "Dignity in Flight, a new standard." Roger spoke with none of the corporate polish that had marked his early statements. He acknowledged failure. He thanked those who spoke up and those who refused to be silenced. He outlined reforms, an independent review board led by outside experts, new training written by people like Monica and Dr. Carter, a policy of public reporting on all bias-related incidents. There were no excuses, no spin, just the hard work of starting over. "Let this be our legacy," he said. "Not the mistake, but the response." The stock price ticked upward, but Roger barely noticed. He knew this was about something much larger than quarterly gains. In the days that followed, the Carter Protocol spread to other airlines. Partner companies adopted the new standards, and the media hailed it as the most significant culture shift in commercial aviation in a generation. But the real change was quieter. Passengers sharing their stories on flights, staff supporting each other, travelers pausing before making a judgment. Back in Vermont, Mildred returned to her life, reading on her porch, tending her small garden, walking by the river at dusk. She fielded the occasional call from Monica, who reported on the growing community of quiet resistors within Atlantic Sky. "They even gave me a pin," Monica laughed once, "a tiny silver feather. They said it's for courage when no one's watching." Sometimes, Mildred wondered if the storm had really passed, or if the world simply learned to weather it better. She saw her story pop up on social media, sometimes misquoted, sometimes perfectly captured. But she didn't need the last word. She had never needed to shout. One evening, a letter arrived, handwritten, stamped from Atlanta. It was from a young woman Mildred didn't know. Inside, a simple message. "I was once asked if I belonged. Because of you, I said yes, and I believed it. Thank you." Mildred read it twice, hands trembling. She tucked it into the same drawer where she kept her late husband's old flight wings, a reminder that dignity, once claimed, could never truly be taken away. She sat quietly on her porch, watching the sun set behind the Vermont hills. She thought of Monica, of Roger McKenna, of the faces in first class and the millions who'd watched from afar. She thought of her grandmother's words, "Never let anyone shrink you." And she understood, maybe for the first time, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to sit, to wait, and to refuse to be moved. A gentle breeze rattled the wind chimes. The world felt at peace, not perfect, not healed, but hopeful. And so Dr. Mildred Carter's journey closed, not with headlines or applause, but with the quiet knowledge that she had helped make room for others to breathe a little easier, to sit a little taller, to answer yes when asked if they belonged. Because in the end, justice is often silent, and dignity needs no permission to fly. Have you ever faced a moment where someone doubted your worth, or made you feel like you didn't belong? How did you respond? If Mildred's story reminded you of your own, or inspired you to speak up in your own way, we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts or stories in the comments. Sometimes, the quietest voices can spark the greatest changes. Your experience might help someone else stand a little taller tomorrow. And if you believe dignity is something we all deserve, no matter where we sit, hit like, share this story, and join us in building a kinder world.